Hello, welcome to another Q&A live all about OET preparation. My name is Rebecca and I'm here with you for the next hour to answer any questions that you might have about preparing for your OET test. And like the summary for today's session said, whether you're getting ready for your test before the end of this year or you're thinking about taking OET in 2023, whatever part of your preparation journey you're currently in, you're welcome to ask questions, concerns, ask for tips or strategies, and I'll answer live and as many of those questions and queries as I can in the next 60 minutes. So very, very simple how this works. Whether you're joining us live on Facebook or on YouTube, you just get to post your question directly into the comment box on either of those social media channels. They come through to me here, and as I say, I work my way through as many of them as I can in the next 60 minutes. And it's great to see a good number of you joining live from our YouTube channel, as well as a good number on Facebook as well. So welcome to everybody joining us today, and thank you to everyone saying hello in the comments. It's great that you've found that comment section. That's where you put your question if you have anything, and let's get started. Let's put this pop-up down and get started with the questions. All right, so the first question comes from Mercy, who's on YouTube, and she says how to improve on reading part A. So I'm going to go straight to a few sets of tips for you about reading part A. So let's bring up this page and hide the comments. These are some of my tips about how to do well in reading part A. So first of all, we really recommend doing the questions in the order that they are written. So the questions have been organized so that that first set of matching questions really helps you to get a good overall sense of what information is in each of the texts, which are all on the same topic. And of course, you're only having to answer A, B, C, or D in those matching questions. So very quick answers to write down. You don't need to really focus too much on accuracy there. And then at the end of those matching questions, when you move on to gap fill and short answer questions, you'll already have a fairly good idea of where the answers to those questions are going to be found, because you've got a good overall sense of those four texts. The other thing about using that time at the beginning is to use what we call text features to quickly find answers. So again, particularly with that first set of matching questions, things like the headings, things like bullet point lists. If you've got a table, the names of the column headers and row headers, all of those text features will help you get a good understanding of which text contains the information that you're looking for. Now, as I said, with those matching questions, there's not a huge amount of accuracy required there. You just need to write down the letter A, B, C, or D, or if you're taking it on computer, click the letter that you are selecting. But when it comes to the answers to the rest of the questions in part A, you must be 100% accurate with your spelling. And that's the same whether you're doing the test on paper or on computer. You must be 100% accurate with your spelling. And we know that a lot of candidates lose marks unnecessarily because they don't just spend a few extra seconds checking the spelling, that they've copied the word exactly as it was written in the text. And my last tip is don't panic about the time. Yes, you only have 15 minutes to answer 20 questions, but as I've been explaining, the first set of questions should be quite quick and simple for you to answer, which then leaves you with the remaining questions to have a little bit longer to decide and to copy directly from the text. But if you panic or if you let the time pressure get to you, it actually reduces your efficiency and your effectiveness at answering the questions. Your stress levels rise and you won't be so confident and efficient, as I say, on the day. So hopefully those tips help. And let's move on to the next question. All right. Let's go back. So here we are. This question also on YouTube comes from May, who's saying, for remarking, how many days or weeks should I wait for the result? So the remarking results are firstly available, or sorry, let's phrase this another way. When you request remarking, you have a 5-day window after you receive your results to request remarking, and no remarking starts until that 5-day period has finished. So once that 5-day period has finished, you can then expect your remarking result within 3 weeks. So calculate from the time when that window closed, 5 days after receiving your results, and then it should be another 3 weeks before you receive your remarking result. If you feel like you should have received a result by now and you haven't, then the best people to contact about that is OET Customer Care. And you can do that via live chat available on the OET website 24 hours a day, Monday to Friday, and they will be able to look up your candidate account and give you any updates that are available. Nicolinka on YouTube says, how do we access exercise tasks for reading part online? So I'm going to post a link into the comments, which is probably a link that you're quite familiar with. This is to our free sample test page. But what some candidates are not finding or seeing, perhaps, is that the free sample test page contains a tab. And this tab is for computer-based testing. So if you want to try out computer-based testing for OET, then you can have a look on this tab. I'm just going to see if I can share my window, because that would be most useful. So here you can see the link I just posted into chat to our free sample test page, and this is the tab that I'm talking about. So currently OET on paper is highlighted in blue. These are all the practice tests available for OET on paper. If you click this tab currently in grey, it will go blue, and it will take you to our practice tests for OET on computer, OET at home. And these are the practice tests available for practicing with the tests. There is some information here about making sure you set up your screen correctly so that the reading tests work as they should do on test day. And also I'd recommend the green button to watch the tutorials to tell you about all the functionality available to you when taking OET on computer. So make sure you click that tab. You can switch between the paper tests and the computer tests just from the sample test page. All right, let's come back to the question. This question from Kirabendran says, in listening part A, does the audio sometimes change in the order compared to the notes given? The answer to that question is no. Each question is done in the order that it is written down. Now, sometimes the line which is containing the gap where you write the answer, some of those words might be said after the answer is heard. So it won't always be that the words in front of the gap are said before the gap and so on, but the questions are always done in order, and the audio follows the order of the questions that you're given on your test paper. Viji on YouTube is asking, how do you get a B score in writing? So for the writing test, you need to demonstrate 6 assessment criteria. If you're aiming for B grade, you're really aiming for a 5 in most of the criteria: content, conciseness and clarity, genre and style, organization and layout, and language. So a 5 in those criteria. and a 3 in the purpose test, or a 2. Obviously, we're talking about aiming as high as possible in the scores that you're aiming for. But to confirm, it's a 2 in purpose and a 5 for all of the other criteria if you're working for a B grade. Now, again, I'm going to post a link into the chat, and this will take you to the writing page of our website. And then once I've shared that link, which I'm just doing now, I'm going to share my screen again, just to talk to you through what it is I think you should be using on this page. So bear with me, I'm just going to share my screen here to the writing page. So I've just posted the link to this page into the comments for today's session. It's all about the writing test. You can see it describes what the test is to write a letter, some useful information provided here about the types of letter that different OET professions are asked to write. And then it moves on talking about how writing is assessed, and a couple of useful resources. I'm just going to come back to those. Some at the bottom, which are also really useful. So there's a lot of content on this page, but the resources that I would recommend looking at are the writing guide. This is a free guide telling you how to score well in the OET writing test, and also to the assessment criteria. This set of criteria, which is just loading up now, this tells you what the assessors are looking for when they are scoring your writing. So this is a little bit small. Let's see if I can just make it a little bit bigger. There we are. So what I was explaining just previously was, in these assessment criteria, to get a B grade, you're aiming at a 2 in purpose and a 5 in the other assessment criteria. So reading this assessment criteria document tells you what the assessors are looking for to be able to give you a score in each of these criterion. And you can use these against some writing that you've already done to decide if this is your level, or to receive feedback on if this is your current level and where you might have strengths and weaknesses. All right, let's get on with the next question. This question is from Pei, who asks, in the listening test, if the audio says a croup cough, but I write a cough, will that be correct? So obviously each listening test or sample test has its own answer key, and I would need to refer to that to be able to tell you definitively what the answer to this question is. But I would imagine that cough on its own is insufficient, because a croup cough is a particular type of cough. It's quite specific and usually occurs in children. So I imagine that if the patient is a child in this case, perhaps the professional is talking to the parent of the child, you would need to include that detail, because a croup cough, as I say, is different. It's more specific than just a regular. Danica on Facebook says, I want to ask if you can write or underline words on the question paper in the exam. So the answer to that is yes. If you're taking OET on paper, for the listening, reading and writing tests, you are able to underline or mark your question booklets. Obviously in the reading test, in the writing test, during the first 5 minutes, which is reading time, you're not able to make any marks on your test paper at that moment. But once the reading time has finished, the 40 minutes writing time has started, then of course you can underline or make other marks. And for reading and listening, it's possible as well. This question on YouTube, is it possible to test only one skill when you have a problem with one of the 4 skills? So I think the question is, can you take the subtests individually? And the answer to that is that it depends on the regulator, the regulating authority that you want to apply to with your OET results. They make the decisions, they set the requirements for candidates about what is and isn't acceptable to them when looking at your OET scores. Most of our regulators do require candidates to take all of the 4 subtests at the same time. And if a resit is necessary, perhaps because you haven't got the scores that you wanted the first time around, to also resit all 4 subtests at the same time. It's best to check directly with the regulator for your specific situation. I can't give you specific advice on that, but what I can tell you is that the majority of regulators are requiring all 4 subtests together. Jenny is asking, what are the tricks for reading Part B and C? Well, I'm afraid there aren't any real tricks that come down to OET. It isn't a test designed to trick you. It's a test to check whether your English level is the one required by the regulating authorities, as I just mentioned. What there are available are strategies that you can use, but these are strategies that you will need to work with. There's nothing that's just going to come really easily in the click of a fingers. These are things that you will need to work on, particularly if you find reading a struggle or a difficulty. But let me tell you a few of those strategies, and I'll focus on reading B. And let's just pop that question down so you can see the whole of the slide. A lot of these tips also work for reading Part C as well, because you can see that the skill level between B and C is just slightly altering, but along the same lines. In B, you are answering a question about one individual text, whereas in C, you're looking at individual paragraphs from a longer text. So the same sort of strategies and tips will work in both B and C. So the first tip is to approach each question individually. You don't need to have got a previous question correct to be able to answer the next question correctly. You don't even need to have answered the previous question to be able to answer the next question correctly. They're all independent questions, independent texts. In reading Part B and C, make sure you look for the evidence to support your choice. So when you think you have found the answer or the sentence containing the answer in the text, read that sentence again once or twice quite carefully, making sure that it really matches all of the meaning of the question. Sometimes some of the distractors that are there will partially answer that question, or they might be something that is said quite definitely in the text, but it isn't something that the question was asking about. So really make sure that you have evidence to support your choice in the text, and read the sentence more than once to make sure you're finding that evidence to be able to support your choice. All right, let's look for the next question. Sorry, just scrolling back to find my place. Here we go. Mehdi on YouTube is saying IELTS and other tests publish within 1 week. Why does it take an eternity for OET to do the same job? So Mehdi, thank you for your question. I can't actually comment on the time it takes other tests to publish their results. I'm not familiar with their result turnaround. What I can tell you is that OET works very hard to get results to candidates as quickly as possible. Something that is different about the way that we assesses candidate results is that everything is double marked. And what that means is that every single test paper from every candidate is marked by a minimum of 2 OET assessors. And all of the test papers are marked solely in one location, which means that there's no chance for any regional variation for candidates who've sat the test perhaps in one particular country compared to another country. So this increases the fairness and the validity of OET, as well as the fairness and validity of the results that you receive. So every single test paper for every candidate goes through double marking to make sure that the result that you are receiving is the correct one. And after that marking takes place, those scores are then tested for quality to make sure that all of the processes that took part in the marking were correct, and the result you receive is the correct one. We are aware that candidates would obviously like their results more quickly, and we are looking at ways in which we can try and reduce that time to turn around results. But I think at the moment, the way that we are working with results, the quality steps that are taken, and the validity shown by using 2 assessors are all part of what makes OET a really test that you can trust and that is appreciated by healthcare regulators. Nice to hear from you, Dr. Farah, for saying that you have passed OET. So congratulations to you. It's always lovely hearing from candidates who have been successful, and we wish you all the best in your future healthcare career. Sheba on YouTube says, has the pattern of OET changed recently? So for example, the speaking and the reading tests? No, OET hasn't changed at all in the last several years. OET was last updated in 2018, and I'll be quick to say that there are no plans to update OET next year or for the foreseeable future. So don't worry if you're concerned or you're hearing rumors around OET changing. There are no plans to change the test, nor has the test changed from what you can find on our website. And that answers the next question coming from Albin. Are there any changes for next year? And the answer to that is no. Lojesh on YouTube saying, are past clubbing scores acceptable coming January for the NMC? So Lojesh, this is really something you will need to check on the NMC's website to make sure that you fully understand the changes that have come in as applicable to your particular situation and set of circumstances. So we always recommend candidates don't take our advice. We can't tell you every candidate specifically for their particular situation. We recommend going to the NMC website, which you can find listed as one of the regulators on our website. And I'll post a link to that page where you can find all of the regulators accepting OET results. You'll find the NMC's website there, able to read about the results that accept the changes to what they're accepting from January. CISO on YouTube says, why are December the 3rd results being released on the 5th of January? This is a question we get asked by candidates every December. So because of the number of public holidays that exist in Australia due to Christmas and New Year, unfortunately, we're unable to maintain the usual results release schedule that we do for other months of the year. However, this information is available and published very far in advance, at least 6 months in advance. So candidates are aware when booking their test for December that their results won't be released to the usual result release schedule. Karen on YouTube says, why are there only a few reading papers on the OET website? So Karen, it sounds like you have used all of the free OET sample tests available to you. However, there are plenty more practice tests that you can purchase from the OET shop. I'll post a link to the shop in the comments box now. And as I say here, you'll find the official OET practice book, as well as a number of other study books that you can use for OET, which include practice tests, but more than that, they include guidance, tips and strategies and exercises that you can complete to help you improve your OET skills and help you get that grade that you're looking for on test day. Gassim is asking whether I can use a marker pen to highlight keywords in listening and reading. So highlighters are one of the stationary items that are not allowed in the test room for OET. The only stationary items that you can take into the test are non-mechanical pens and pencils. So those are pens and pencils that do not have a kind of click function. That's called a mechanical pencil. So it needs to be a pen or a pencil without any kind of click function. You can also take a pencil sharpener and an eraser if you are using a pencil during your test. So those are the only stationary items you can take into the test room. Highlighters and correction fluid, for example, are not permitted. Okay, just going to scroll down a bit. I can see some of you have been patiently waiting and have repeated your questions. So let's just look for some other questions that I haven't answered yet. So this question from Tony, I used a national ID to register for OET. Unlike a passport, there's no expiry date, but one was asked for during registration. So Tony, this is something to contact OET customer care about. They'll be able to assist you with this question and support you to complete the registration process. So the best way to contact customer care is from the OET website and use the live chat function, which is a blue button you'll find in the corner of the screen, which says chat with an expert. It's a blue button, and live chat is available 24 hours a day, Monday to Friday. Elizabeth is asking why OET doesn't issue, I assume you mean a physical certificate like other language testing exams. The reason for this is partly security. We work with some really high stakes regulators, not just healthcare regulators, but also immigration departments from different countries. And they want a way of really verifying that the results a candidate has are in fact legitimate results. And so the way that your results are created is digitally, so that they can then be shared digitally with those regulating authorities. So you give permission for the regulator that you want to apply to with your results to view your results. They can go into a secure verification portal on our website, and they know that then the results that you share with them are in fact the correct results and that they are valid and have been checked by us. All right. Rubini on YouTube says, can we increase our OET reading from a C+ to a B by going through the remarking process? A little bit earlier, I was answering a question about how OET papers are assessed. And I mentioned that during the original marking process, all subtests are marked by a minimum of 2 assessors, and then combined to create the final score you receive. The reason for that, as I mentioned, is to make sure or increase the reliability of the results that you receive. It doesn't just come down to one individual person who could perhaps be having a bad day or be feeling tired or hungry. The fact that there are two assessors checking your scores gives you that extra level of confidence that the result you receive is in fact the correct one. However, if the result that you do receive isn't one that you're satisfied with, you feel that your test day performance wasn't reflected by that score, you can apply for remarking during the 5 days after you receive your results. Now, during the remarking process, the same thing happens as during the original marking. Two different assessors to the one that marked your test originally are given your paper, and they go through it and mark using the same answer key that the original assessors used. In reading and listening, it's important to mention that only part A is remarked whenever a candidate asks for that paper to be remarked. And that's because parts B and C of reading and listening are multiple choice and can be marked by a computer. And we know that computers don't have room for error in the same way that human assessors do. So during the remarking process for reading and listening, only part A is remarked. Two assessors are scoring your test using the same answer key as the set of assessors. And for those reasons, it is very unusual for a candidate to increase their score sufficiently to change grade, for example, from a C+ to a C. Usually, if there is any change at all during the remarking process, it's by 10 or 20 points at the most, but not enough usually to change a grade boundary. You also need to be aware that your score could go down as well as up, but most likely it will stay the same. Alan on Facebook is saying, what textbook do you recommend for teaching an OET medical student course? Hi, Alan, it's nice to hear from you. We recommend any of those textbooks that are available in the OET shop that I linked to recently, as I was explaining then. There are a number of textbooks there that can be used either by an individual student or as part of a course of study with a teacher. And these textbooks include guidance, exercises, different kinds of activities to try to improve the skills needed for success in OET. And it's all pulled together to create some sample tests towards the end of those course books so that candidates can build up their skills during the early sections of the book and then test themselves out with sample tests towards the end of the book. Another question from Tony, who says, is it compulsory to use a mirror during OET speaking at home? Can we use headphones during the test? So Tony, I'm going to direct you to information that we have about OET at home. We have a booklet specifically to explain what is and is possible during OET at home. Things about the use of a mirror, whether headphones are or aren't allowed. So I'm going to put a link to that in the chat now. Some of you may also be interested in finding out more about OET at home. This is the version of OET that is available for candidates who do not have access to a physical test venue in their country. Now, that physical test venue means that it could be on paper or on computer. If you don't have access to either of those types of venue in your country, then you are eligible to take OET at home, which means that your test is carried out on your own laptop, and someone, which is called a remote proctor, will be observing you taking the test at all times through your laptop camera. So if that's something that is of interest to you and you're aware that you don't have access to a test venue, have a look at the link that I've posted into the comments for more details about OET at home. Can see a few questions coming through, like this one from Prixie, who's asking, would this answer be considered correct? So for example, with this one, if the answer is nails and I write nail, would it be considered correct? And there have been other similar sorts of questions coming through along these lines. Now, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, when I had another question along those lines, every listening test or reading test has a specified answer key that the assessors are using to score your answers. And if there is a variation that is allowed, that will be included on that answer key so that you are aware what is or isn't going to be considered correct for that test. Now, when it comes down to something like plurals, which Prixie is asking about, it could be marked correct, but equally it might be marked incorrect. It depends really on the context. For example, if you're writing to someone and the nails in question mean your fingernails, for example, or your toenails, then knowing that it's affecting more than one nail or one individual nail is quite a difference. And so depending on the context, if it was along those lines, talking about fingernails, then I would suggest that answer would be considered incorrect because it's suggesting one nail only, whereas the audio was talking about multiple nails. All right. All good questions. I'm looking for some new questions that are coming through. This question from Maria is saying, is the test the same for all candidates taking the test on the same day? So the answer to that question is no. More than one version of OET is used. And again, as I mentioned earlier, this is partly for security reasons. We need to make sure that the security of the test is maintained. And so candidates who are sitting the test on the same day, but in different test venues, may be seeing a different version of the test as part of that means of maintaining security. However, I can reassure you that if you're aware after your test that you have had a different version, perhaps to someone else that you're in contact with, there's no difference in the level of difficulty between the versions of the test used on the same day. The way that OET is written, checked, and standardized means that the level of difficulty is the same from version of the test to other version of the test, from test date to test date. A follow-up question from Tony, who's saying, in listening part A, would a synonym for the correct answer be considered correct as well? So this is a very clear answer, Tony. The answer is no. The instructions for listening part A specifically mention that you must write the word or phrase that you hear in the audio. That means paraphrase, even if the synonym has the same meaning, will not be marked correctly. The test is for you to hear the answer as it is given and to write that word or phrase into your answer page. All right. This question on Facebook, how long does it take someone to prepare before taking OET exams? So this really depends from candidate to candidate, and it depends on a few things. It depends on what your current level of English is. It depends on how much time during a week you're available for study. And it depends on when you are available to take the test. So all of it to be considered, how long it will take you to prepare. Now, the closer you are to being at the level required, to apply to the regulator that you want to with OET results, the less time, obviously, it would need to take. However, if you haven't got much time available in the week to prepare, and or your current level of English isn't close to the level that is required, you're going to need to spend longer time getting ready for the test. So you need to really be realistic with yourself. How long do you find that you're going to need for the test to get ready for it? And one thing that might help you to answer that question is OET Pulse. This is a placement test which tells you what your current level of English is. I'm going to post a link to Pulse in the comments now. So short placement test, it takes roughly 30 to 45 minutes to complete. We'll give you a result of what your current language level is, and you can use that and the advice that you receive at the end of the test to make a decision about how much preparation you're going to need. Bieber on YouTube is saying, will someone be penalized for repeating words in a question regarding to reading part A? The answer to that is yes. So you will be penalized if you repeat a question word in reading part A. It's important that you only provide the answer needed to answer the question. So repeating words isn't part of that instruction, isn't part of the answer, and so you will be penalized if you are repeating yourself or repeating the question. So only write down the word or phrase that answers the question and don't repeat words that are provided in the question. Just going to call out, because I don't want candidates to be spammed by this, that I'm trying to block somebody on Facebook calling themselves OET Hero and suggesting candidates contact them, providing a phone number. This is a spam contact. It's nothing to do with OET at all, even though the logo that they're using as their picture is the OET logo. As I said, I'm trying to block this person from commenting further. But please, if you see that comment, and particularly if it's got your name attached to it, please ignore that message. It is a spam. This question from Samara on YouTube says, in gap fill questions, mostly the first letter of the answer starts with a small letter, even if it's the start of a sentence. So in the reading and listening test, capitalization is not specifically assessed. This means that you don't need to worry particularly about whether you are starting your answer with a capital letter or not. And that's true even if the way that the gap appears in the sentence is that this is the first word of the sentence or phrase. It's not specifically assessed. The only instance where capitalization would be assessed in listening or reading is if the answer is an acronym. So, for example, SIDS, Sudden Infant Death Syndrome, is an acronym and therefore would be written fully in capital letters. And for example, in reading part A, if that was the answer, it would appear as an acronym in capital letters. So you would copy it as you would any other letter, exactly as it was written using capital letters. But in terms of thinking about whether you start your answer with a capital letter or not, you don't need to specifically worry about that. You're not going to be penalized. Sanju is asking whether the warm-up questions in the speaking test are assessed. No, they're not. All of the speaking tests from the moment that you sit down in the room or from the Zoom conversation, if you're taking OET on computer, is recorded. And again, that is for security purposes as well as training purposes. And what it means is that the assessors can listen to the quality of the recording. They can also provide feedback on the interlocutor if any feedback is required. So although the warm-up questions are going to be recorded, they are strictly not assessed. They don't form any part of your final score, which purely comes from your speaking during the 2 role plays, the 5 minutes of the 2 role plays that you have available. Litty on YouTube says, can you please tell me what's the required score for reading and listening out of 42 if you want to score a B grade? So on test day, there is no fixed passing score for listening and reading. Each test, the passing score or a B grade score is slightly different. This is because different questions are used, different topics are used, and to make sure that every candidate has equal opportunity of getting the score that they want on test day. The grade boundaries are fluid. They can slide slightly up or slightly down, depending on the particular challenge of the questions and topics used in that test. Now, remember, it's a very slight difference. We're not talking about huge differences between test dates or versions of the test. They are all roughly the same level of challenge. But for example, if you found a particular test really quite easy or quite difficult, then it's likely that those test boundaries will be adjusted accordingly for that test. It means that the advice we give candidates when they're getting ready for OET is when they're using official sample practice tests to aim for between 30, 31 and 32 out of 42 questions correct. So somewhere between 30 to 32 correct should make you feel confident about getting a B grade on test day. As always, the higher you can get during the practice, the more confident you will feel on test day that you're going to get the result that you wanted. Krishna on YouTube says, does each question carry the same mark, or does it depend on the question pattern in reading and listening? So for reading and listening, each question is equally worth 1 mark. There is either a right answer or a wrong answer. There are no half marks available. So you will either score 1 or 0 for each question in reading and listening. Okay, just having a look for some new questions. So here's one. Kenny Mosey on Facebook. I took OET exam on the 8th of October. I got B for speaking and reading. Listening and writing is C+. I did really well in listening. It was very easy for me. How do I score better in listening and write the answer in part A? Should it be in uppercase or lowercase? All right, so with listening part A particularly, as I was mentioning, there's no rule or assessment to do with capitalization. So you don't need to worry particularly about whether you wrote your answers in uppercase or lowercase or anything like that. What you do need to be careful about is making sure your answer is legible. Assessors are very fluent with reading messy handwriting, shall we say, but it's got to be legible. And sometimes what can happen is most of the word is legible, but 1 or 2 letters, perhaps towards the end of the word, are just sort of scrawled out. They just end in a sort of a line. And for the assessor, that's impossible for them to guess what that sort of scrawl at the end meant. So do make sure that the whole word word or is legible. Make sure that it's really clear. Perhaps if you've changed your mind about an answer before submitting your answers, that your final answer is obvious. So that can be done by erasing and then writing over the top, or using a line to cross out the answer that you don't want to be scored and writing a new answer above it. Make sure that you get the answer on the line provided for the answer. And you need to be as accurate as you can with your spelling. You are given time at the end of the listening test to check your answers. And one of the things that you should be checking is your spelling, particularly really common words, words like cough or rash, or, you know, really common words, symptom words, other kinds of words to do with the patient's history should be spelled correctly. It's only the more unusual words, the more advanced words, that allowance is made for spelling mistakes. Norovich says, what if we exceed the number of approximate words in OET writing, but have included all of the relevant information? So say 230 words. It's good that you've understood that the focus is on including only relevant information. However, if you have written that many words, a few words over the 200 words, they're not counted by the assessors. They're not counting specifically how many words you have written, but they're a good judge at knowing what 180 to 200 words look like. If you've written 230 words, perhaps what you need to focus on is making your writing more concise. Concise means communicating an idea in as few words as possible. And for some candidates, this is something that's very easy to do. Other candidates find that quite difficult. They use a lot of words to say perhaps quite a simple fact that they need to communicate. So if you're finding yourself writing more than the guided word limit, perhaps the thing to focus on would be to look again at your sentences and see if there are words that you could cut out of the sentence, or whether you could say that same sentence more simply, because that would then improve your score, as I say, for conciseness and clarity, one of the assessment criteria. Remember is that the guided word limit is only for the paragraphs of the letter. It doesn't include the address, the greeting, the reference line, the ending to your letter. It's only the paragraphs that are included in that guided word limit. Sheena is asking about a role play card in a recent exam and whether there was any brackets and information in the brackets. Sheena, I'm afraid I have no way of commenting on that. I don't know if that was your own experience or whether it was an experience that you heard about from another candidate. All I can say is that our test materials are standardized. They have to meet a specific set of criteria to be used. And we have a team dedicated to the creation of test materials that are also checked by subject matter experts. So I can't tell you exactly, obviously, what happened on that test, but I can tell you that the materials will not have been different to any other materials used in any other test. This question, is it mandatory to ask background information in every role play? No, it's not. The role cards, as I was just mentioning, are there to give you the information that you need to speak about, and you only need to speak about those things on your role play card. And sometimes gathering background information is not part of your task, in which case it's not something that you include. You just need to move through the task on your role card, and the tasks have been received to demonstrate assessment criteria. Assessors have the ability to score you for criteria. All right, let's just look for a few final questions. We're coming towards our last 5 minutes. This question from Elizabeth: when will OET be recognized in Canada? We're working at it. We've been really excited by the amount of recognition we're getting for OET in America, and we are working to extend that even further. We want all of the US states to recognize OET, as well as working to gain recognition in Canada. And we're having lots of good conversations with the Canadian authorities and healthcare regulators. As soon as we have any news to share, we will, of course, let you know. Pay is saying, will headsets be provided for the listening subtest in every test venue? No, not necessarily Pay. This is something that you can check when you go to the booking page of the OET website. And let me post a link page so that you check it out. When you look for a test venue that you want to take your test, it will include a number of details about the test venue, what type of OET it offers. For example, is it paper or computer? It will also mention if headphones are available. So if that's something that's particularly important to you, you can check for that. And if there's more than one test venue available in your location, you can perhaps make a decision on which venue you want to select. Right, I am looking for one more question. I'm going to answer this one from Jem, who says, can OET test scores be used for registration with HCPC as a radiographer in the UK? The answer to that is yes. You are able to use your OET results with HCPC. They may ask you to provide a letter from OET proving your test results meet their requirements. In case, please do contact OET customer care, mention that you are looking for an HCPC letter, and they will be able to assist you with that. I'm afraid I don't have the details around visas, but as I mentioned earlier in the session, you can have a look at the regulator page on the OET website, which I provided a little bit earlier in the session as a link. And you can check out from the Immigration Department page of the UK what is and isn't allowed for different countries. Sorry, I was stumbling because I saw this question coming through from Mehdi. This seems a good question to finish on, which is, which team do you support in the World Cup? Well, living in Australia, I'd have to say Australia, but being British as well as Australian, I would be torn between England and Australia. So I guess I'll support both and see which one works out. But if you are looking forward to the World Cup, I hope you have success with your team. It will be an interesting competition, I'm sure. All right, thank you so much for all of the questions that have been coming through. I'm sorry if I haven't managed to answer your question today. I will be back in a couple of weeks' time towards the end of November with another Q&A live session. So if I didn't get to your session today, you're welcome to join me again in a couple of weeks, and I'll look forward to answering more of your questions then. In the meantime, if you would like an answer to your question, you can send a message through Facebook Messenger. We have an answering system there where someone from the education team will respond to your questions as soon as they can, usually within around 24 hours. And that's a useful way for candidates to get some of these preparation questions answered. So do join me for that session. And remember that, as always, we have live sessions being delivered by our all-star preparation providers. So coming up this week, tomorrow, in fact, we've got our partners SLC, who will be delivering a session tomorrow on listening part C. And that will be starting around this time tomorrow. so look out for that session from SRC. Then we have a speaking session with Swoosh English on Friday. This speaking session is going to focus on active listening, or you're picking on the patient is telling you. And then on Saturday, we've got a session from IRA who are going to be talking about listening part B. So a lot of good listening content going on this week. And remember, my colleague Alex will also be back on Monday with another IYE session. These are really popular live sessions that Alex is delivering, helping you to improve your language skills. So there's a lot to follow and like us for, either on Facebook or YouTube. And I hope that you'll be able to join some of those live sessions soon. Thank you so much for joining me today. As always, it's been my pleasure to answer your questions. I hope you have a good rest of your day, and I will see you soon. Bye for now.